The Case of Shannon, Christian and Christopher Newsom, the tragic end of two college students. Have you ever heard the saying that hesitation is akin to death? In our story today, this takes on a literal meaning as the negligent delay by police officers cost the lives of two young people. During the subsequent legal proceedings, it was repeatedly stated that the officers followed protocol and waited 24 hours from the time of the missing persons report. However, it was during these critical hours that the couple endured a tragic end under extreme cruelty. The case of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom is cited as one of the most notorious and brutal in the history of the United States. It shook the nation twice, first in 2007 when the crimes occurred, and later in 2011 when the sentences handed down to the gang members were challenged and appealed. This complicated legal battle led to the enactment of two laws. These laws restrict attorneys and defendants from casting the victims in a negative light and abolish the requirement for a jury's unanimous verdict to be approved by a judge. In this harrowing tale, there were two innocent victims and 5 merciless criminals, with the motive for the heinous act being a simple robbery. Let's delve into the details of this tragedy, piece together the chronology of those horrific events, understand the role of each participant, and explore whether this tragedy could have been avoided and the young lives saved. Who were Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom? Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr., commonly known as Chris, was born on September 21, 1983, in Knoxville, Tennessee, to Mary and Hugh Newsom, in a loving, large family. As the youngest child, he was adored by his family. Chris was athletic in his youth, particularly excelling in baseball during his school years. His coach believed he had a bright future in the sport, but a severe injury and a prolonged recovery process ended his promising athletic career. Nevertheless, Chris was a man of many talents. He was an excellent artist, played guitar, had woodworking skills, and was knowledgeable about cars and motorcycles. Dreaming of becoming a mechanic in his youth, Chris's passion for carpentry eventually took precedence. After high school, he attended the prestigious University of Tennessee, where he was a diligent student and ranked among the top of his class. Shannon Gale Christian was born on April 29, 1985, in Nacogdoches, Texas, the younger of 2 children to Dina and Gary Christian. She was raised alongside her older brother Chase, with whom she shared a close and affectionate bond. Notably, Dina had been diagnosed with infertility in her youth, and the birth of her 2 children was considered nothing short of miraculous. In 1997, the Christian family moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, where the children attended local schools, and the parents established a small but profitable family business. Dina conducted individual psychotherapy sessions at home. Shannon, sharing her mother's interest in psychology, was outgoing and kind-hearted. After high school, she pursued a degree in sociology at the University of Tennessee and worked part-time to save for her dream of buying a car. Her parents and brother helped her realize this dream on her 21st birthday, contributing towards the purchase of a silver Toyota 4Runner. It was on the university campus in 2006 that Christopher and Shannon met through mutual friends. She was just 21, and he was about to turn 23. It was love at first sight, and the couple became inseparable. Within a month, Chris introduced Shannon to his parents, expressing his desire to spend his future with her. Shannon reciprocated by introducing Chris to her family, who warmly welcomed him. In October 2006, a significant family dinner was held, attended by both their parents and siblings. Discussions revolved around the young couple's deep feelings and their plans to marry after graduating from university. Everyone was happy and full of hope for the future, blissfully unaware of the tragedy that would soon befall their families. Vanished on the way to a party. On January 6, 2007, Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom were invited to a birthday party of a mutual friend. That Saturday, Shannon visited a beauty salon to prepare for the celebration, parking her car in a nearby underground garage where they planned to meet. However, Chris was delayed, leading to a slight argument between them as they were running late for the event. Their friends became increasingly worried when Shannon and Chris did not show up at the party. Known for their responsibility, it was unlike them to miss an event without notifying anyone. Attempts to reach them on their phones were unsuccessful. In desperation, Shannon's best friend repeatedly called her mother late into the night to check if everything was all right, but received no answer. The next morning, Dina, Shannon's mother, realized that her daughter had not come home. Initially, she was not overly concerned, assuming Shannon might have stayed over at Chris's place after the party. Besides, Shannon had a work shift on Sunday, so it was plausible she went straight to work from Chris's place. However, Dina's concern grew when she noticed several missed calls from an unknown number around midnight. Returning the call, she heard Shannon's friend's voice, informing her that Shannon and Chris had not shown up at the birthday party and were unreachable. This instilled fear in Dina, sensing that something terrible might have happened to her daughter and her boyfriend. Neither Shannon nor Chris was answering their phones, and Chris's parents were equally surprised, believing he was staying at Shannon's place. Further anxiety arose when it was discovered Shannon had not shown up for work either. The worried parents immediately contacted the police, but the response was lackluster. The officers suggested the couple might have simply sought some alone time and lost track of it. They also followed the protocol that an adult is considered missing only after 24 hours without contact. But for Shannon and Chris, those 24 hours were critical. Not willing to wait, the parents and friends of the young couple began their own search. They contacted everyone they knew, visited hospitals, distributed flyers with their photos, and set up social media groups appealing for any information about the missing students. Despite their efforts, no useful information surfaced. The last known sighting of Shannon was at the beauty salon she visited on Saturday. According to the hairstylist who attended her, Shannon only talked about the upcoming party and had no plans to stop anywhere else on the way. A gruesome discovery along the railroad tracks. It wasn't until Monday, January 8th, that the police finally began their search for the missing young couple, Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. By this time, thanks to the efforts of their parents and friends, almost the entire city was aware of their disappearance. The day before, on Sunday, there were rumors about a horrifying discovery near the railroad tracks, but no concrete information was available. A railroad worker, inspecting the tracks in his assigned area, stumbled upon what appeared to be severely damaged human remains on the embankment alongside the tracks. The body was in a horrific state, with multiple injuries, and had been doused with a flammable liquid in an attempt to burn it. The police, responding to the scene, cordoned off the area and conducted a thorough examination. However, they were unable to find any significant clues or leads. After taking necessary photographs, the remains were sent to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death and to attempt identification, though it was clear that the extensive damage and effects of the fire would make this difficult. Forensic experts determined that the body belonged to a young man who had suffered a brutal death. The victim had multiple injuries inflicted while he was alive, indicating prolonged and severe assault. Almost all of his teeth had been knocked out or damaged by blows. He had been shot 3 times, twice in the back and a final, fatal shot to the head. Additionally, traces of seminal fluid from at least 3 different men were found in his body, along with distinctive tears, suggesting repeated violent assaults. When police checked recent reports of missing young men, Christopher Newsom fit the description in age, height, and build. The officers contacted his parents and requested DNA samples for confirmation, but strongly advised against personal identification at the morgue, as the burnt remains barely resembled human features. Unfortunately, the DNA analysis confirmed that the body belonged to the missing student, Newsom. The search for Shannon. Despite the distressing news about Christopher, Shannon Christian's parents still clung to the hope that their daughter was alive, possibly being held somewhere. Her mobile phone was last pinged on the day the couple disappeared in one of Knoxville's more troubled neighborhoods, a place they wouldn't have visited by choice. This indicated that they were likely brought there against their will, and Shannon might still be held in the area. In a secluded alley of this neighborhood, Shannon's Toyota 4Runner was found abandoned. It was in a terrible state, so much so that Dina and Gary Christian hardly recognized their daughter's car. The SUV was dirty, scratched, with broken headlights and deflated tires. All of Shannon's personal belongings were missing from the car, which was littered with cigarette butts, and the seats were torn and stained. The driver's seat was pushed far back, suggesting that a large adult male had been the last one to drive it. A crumpled envelope with the address 2316 Chipman Street was found on the floor between the seats, likely dropped by the perpetrator. A local witness reported seeing 4 African-American males driving the SUV that Saturday evening, a vehicle that stood out in that area. Fingerprints on the envelope led the police to Lamarcus Davidson, previously convicted for serious offenses. His residence, located in an industrial area near a wasteland, lacked witnesses. When no one responded to the police's knock and offer to surrender, they forced entry, hoping to find Shannon alive inside. Inside the house, they found Shannon's purse, a stuffed toy from her car, as well as Christopher's headphones and baseball cap. A knife with blood traces, torn and blood-stained fragments of women's clothing, and Shannon's lifeless body were discovered in the house's trash chute system, hidden under dirty sheets. She was bound in the fetal position and wrapped in 5 trash bags. Experts later concluded that she likely passed away in the early hours of Monday, January 8th. This tragic finding suggested that if the police had begun their search immediately after the missing persons report, rather than waiting for 24 hours, Shannon might have been saved. A horrific state of suffering. The condition of Shannon Christian's body was a horrifying sight even for seasoned forensic experts, as there was not a single untouched area on her. Shannon was covered from head to toe with bruises, abrasions, cuts, and cigarette burns. The numerous tears and injuries to her genital area, as well as her oral cavity and throat, indicated that she had been subjected to multiple assaults by several men. Shannon sustained a serious head injury and internal bleeding in the abdominal area, likely resulting from being kicked. Furthermore, the merciless assailants inflicted several penetrating, though not fatal, stab wounds on her and extinguished dozens of cigarettes on her skin. In a brutal attempt to destroy DNA evidence on her body, the perpetrators doused her with household bleach, paying particular attention to bleeding wounds and her genital area. She was also forcibly made to ingest bleach. After these torturous acts, Shannon, still alive, was wrapped in 5 trash bags and then shoved into a household trash chute, covered with sheets and rags. She slowly suffocated and bled to death, helplessly trapped with no chance of escape or calling for help. 5 merciless perpetrators. Lamarcus Davidson, in whose house the mutilated body of Shannon Christian and personal belongings of the deceased Christopher Newsom were found, was immediately declared a fugitive. The police also tracked down another suspect, Eric Boyd, whose traces were found at the crime scene. Boyd was apprehended on January 11th without resistance and agreed to cooperate with the investigation, claiming he wouldn't go to prison for crimes he didn't commit. Boyd revealed that Davidson was hiding in a vacant house listed for sale and personally led the police to the location. Davidson, unprepared for this turn of events, was caught off guard and offered no resistance. Notably, at the time of his arrest, Davidson was wearing sneakers that had belonged to the deceased student. During interrogations, Davidson tried to minimize his role, portraying himself as a victim. He claimed that the couple had come to his house looking to buy banned substances, but were caught up in a conflict with his acquaintances. Davidson insisted that he left to avoid involvement, and the subsequent brutal acts occurred in his absence. Further interrogations revealed 3 more individuals involved in the case: Davidson's friend, George Thomas, his half-brother, Latalvis Cobbins, and an 18-year-old woman named Vanessa Lynn Coleman. Once all 5 suspects were in custody, they were placed in separate cells and interrogated individually. Each tried to deflect blame onto the others, inadvertently revealing details of the heinous crime. Their fragmented accounts helped piece together the event's chronology and each perpetrator's role in the brutal act. A timeline of tragic events. Lamarcus Davidson, who had been released from prison on parole just a few months before these events, was desperately in need of money. He was involved in the sale of banned substances and urgently required a vehicle to deliver these to his customers. Davidson decided to steal a car from an underground parking lot, known for its lack of surveillance cameras, and headed there with his accomplices. Tragically, at that moment, students Shannon and Christopher were in the parking lot, arguing over Chris's delay. The criminals, deciding to leave no witnesses, forced the couple into the trunk of a car at gunpoint. The pair was taken to Davidson's house, where they were brutally beaten and repeatedly assaulted. After midnight, a barefoot and undressed Christopher was again forced into the trunk and taken to the railroad tracks. He was ordered to walk on the stones before being shot twice in the back. His torment was ended with a final shot to the head. His body was then doused with a flammable liquid and set on fire, in hopes of destroying any evidence that could lead to the perpetrators. Having dealt with Newsom, the criminals returned to the house where Shannon remained bound. She endured horrific cruelty the next day, leaving her without a single uninjured area on her body. The sadists concluded their torture by dousing her with bleach and packing her, still alive, into plastic trash bags, where she slowly suffocated. The exact moment when young Vanessa Coleman joined the group was unclear. During interrogations, she claimed to be a hostage herself, participating in the torture out of fear for her life. However, Boyd indicated that Coleman was Davidson's girlfriend and willingly participated in the events, even taking some of Shannon's jewelry and mobile phone. Further, a personal diary found at Vanessa's home contained her descriptions of the horrors at her boyfriend's house, which she referred to as an exciting adventure. The initial trials and sentences. During the investigation, it was established that Lamarcus Davidson, born in 1981, was the leader of the criminal group and the primary instigator of the brutal acts against the innocent victims. Davidson tried to deflect blame and downplay his role in the atrocities, attempting to shift responsibility onto the deceased themselves. Davidson claimed that the couple came to his house to buy banned substances and later suggested engaging in rough intimacy with him and his friends, a situation he said spiraled out of control. Remarkably, the defendant's lawyers latched onto this version, attempting to tarnish the reputations of the deceased in court. The parents of the victims later expressed immense emotional anguish over these claims. Nevertheless, Davidson was found guilty on 40 counts, including assault, kidnapping, robbery, and particularly cruel and premeditated termination of life, among others. The jury unanimously decided that Davidson deserved the death penalty for his heinous acts. Latalvis Cobbins, born in 1982, faced the death penalty for his role in the torture, assaults, and involvement in the termination of life. However, he was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. George Thomas, born in 1983, received a similar life sentence for his involvement in the same crimes, with no chance of release. Eric Boyd, considering his cooperation with the investigation and assistance in capturing Davidson, was sentenced to 18 years of imprisonment. The relatives of both victims found this sentence outrageously lenient. As for Vanessa Coleman, born in 1988, the only female participant in the atrocities, the investigation proved her involvement in the torture, assaults, and in Shannon's tragic end. She was sentenced to 53 years in prison. Overturned verdicts and new hearings in 2011 while the criminals were serving their sentences and Davidson awaited execution, the case took an unexpected turn. The presiding judge resigned, admitting to a substance dependency. His ability to conduct trials was questioned, and his verdicts over the last 2 years were annulled, leading to new hearings, including the case of Christian and Newsom. A new judge scheduled hearings for all 5 individuals involved in the student's tragic end. After the retrials, Davidson's sentence remained unchanged: death penalty. Cobbins continued to serve his life sentence without the possibility of parole. Thomas, however, received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 51 years. Vanessa Coleman's sentence was reduced from the original 53 years to 35 years. Her appeal in 2014 was rejected, and parole was denied in 2017. In 2020, the parole board decided she would remain incarcerated at least until April 2032. Eric Boyd's situation changed most dramatically. Originally receiving a relatively short sentence for cooperating with the investigation, his involvement in the assaults and tragic end of both victims was later proven. His retrial resulted in a life sentence without parole, with his accomplice Thomas testifying against him, revealing previously unknown details about Boyd's role. For his testimony, Thomas, who initially had the possibility of parole after 51 years, had his sentence reduced by 15%, contingent on good behavior. Oid's attempts to appeal his new sentence were unsuccessful. He is currently serving his sentence in the Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. Davidson remains in the maximum security Riverbend institution, awaiting the execution of his death sentence. Public reaction and the case's impact. As previously mentioned, this trial garnered significant attention, widely covered in the press, and leading to the enactment of two laws. The first was aimed at protecting victims from defamation, attempts to shift blame onto them, and portraying them negatively. This was in response to the defense strategy of the accused and their lawyers, who tried to label the students as drug users and thrill seekers in a troubled neighborhood. These claims were completely false and caused immense pain and suffering to the victims' families. The second law eliminated the need for a judge's signature on a jury's unanimous verdict, which, if in place during this case, could have prevented the need for retrials and sentence reviews. The house at 2316 Chipman Street, which became a torture chamber for the young couple, was demolished in the fall of 2008. A memorial was erected on the site in honor of Shaman Christian and Christopher Newsom. In memory of Christian, a golf tournament and a Christian charity foundation were established, providing support to victims of violence. Similarly, a foundation in Newsom's name was created, holding annual memorial baseball tournaments at Halls Park and awarding a scholarship named after the deceased student and former baseball player. It's important to note that, despite the public outcry and widespread attention, the media initially misrepresented details of the case, either accidentally or intentionally. Many believed that the variations in reporting and delayed coverage were influenced by racial motives, as the victims were white and the perpetrators were African American. However, the head of the Association of Criminal Writers and Editors noted, "I can't confidently say that this case would have received more attention if 5 white criminals had been accused of committing similar atrocities against 2 black individuals." Additionally, the Knoxville police chief stated that there was no evidence to suggest these crimes were committed based on racial animosity. Today, we'll be exploring one of the most southern states in America, Mississippi. This state is rich in amazing places, such as the Vicksburg National Military Park, a Civil War battle site, Biloxi Beach, a perfect spot for coastal relaxation. Animal lovers will definitely appreciate the Marine Mammal Studies Institute. History and architecture enthusiasts will be captivated by the town of Melrose, which boasts many stunningly beautiful homes. And undoubtedly, the Biloxi Lighthouse is an excellent place for photography. But the brightest star of the state is, of course, the renowned University of Mississippi, commonly known as Ole Miss, where our story unfolds. During the summer, when academic activities on the university campus come to an end, it becomes especially quiet. The few students who remain over the summer attend extra lectures during the day or prepare on their own for the next academic year, and in the evening, they invariably visit local bars and nightclubs. Among these students was Ellie Kostiel. She was an upperclassman and stayed on campus over the summer to improve her knowledge in certain subjects. Recently, she passed an important exam for her class, Introduction to Retail, at summer school, and was planning to celebrate this with her friends. A small bar with pizza and daiquiris on Oxford Square is particularly popular among the youth, so it's always filled with people and resembles an eternal party. The dim light, loud music, and a rainbow selection of various drinks make it a place where bartenders know many of the customers by name. On the evening of July 19th, Ellie Kostiel met up with friends at this bar. They talked and had fun, but Ellie seemed tense and spent the whole evening messaging someone on her phone. Then she had a couple of cocktails and discreetly left. This was one of the last places where Ole Miss student Ellie Kostiel was seen in public. On July 20th, 2019, around 10:30 a.m. during their routine patrol, police officers discovered the body of a young woman. It was found near an abandoned fishing camp by Sardis Lake, approximately 30 miles from the university. At the scene, the victim was found with 9 gunshot wounds to her back. Investigators collected 11 shell casings at the scene. A purse containing a driver's license and a student ID belonging to 21-year-old Alexandria Kostiel, a University of Mississippi student, was found nearby on the roadside. Alexandria Kostiel, affectionately known by friends and family as Ellie, was born on September 11, 1997, in St. Louis, Missouri. A blonde-haired little girl, she grew up surrounded by the care and love of her mother, Cindy, and father, Keith. Her parents supported all her endeavors in learning new things. Ellie excelled academically and in sports, participating in track and field and golf. She loved adventures and traveling, but her dream was to attend the University of Mississippi. This special place, with its traditions and new student life, was her dream destination. Her dream came true, and she became a student at the legendary Ole Miss. Ellie lived in a dormitory in Oxford, Mississippi, and was popular among her peers. Friends and relatives praised Ellie, describing her as a lively and energetic person who greeted everyone with a smile. The tragic loss was a shock to the close-knit community of the lovely girl and her fellow students at the University of Mississippi, as investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the facts. Ellie's father confirmed the tragic news of her death in a Facebook post on Sunday. Yesterday, on Saturday afternoon, the Sunset Hills, Missouri, police visited us and informed us that our beautiful dear Alexandria, our sweet Ellie, was the victim of a crime, wrote Keith Kostiel. She was attending summer school and taught fitness at the University of Mississippi in Oxford, Mississippi. She graduated from Lindbergh High School in 2016. She was just 21 years old. "We are deeply saddened," said Interim Chancellor of the University of Mississippi Larry Sparks in a statement to Today. Ellie was a valued member of our student community. Lafayette County investigator Jarrett Bundren told CBS on Saturday morning, a white female was found on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to her back. "I'm working on this case and it's heartbreaking, the girl who was shot so many times." According to sources, a local resident walking their dog reported hearing gunshots early in the morning between approximately 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. Initiating an investigation, police immediately gained access to the rented apartment where Ellie Kostiel lived. Although the victim's phone was missing, her Apple Watch was discovered in the room. Witness interviews revealed that a few days before the incident, Ellie's parents had visited her from St. Louis, and she had shared with them how eagerly she was looking forward to the start of the new academic year at the university and had no regrets about staying on campus for the summer. Data from the Apple Watch also showed that after a phone conversation with her mother, the young woman sent several messages to someone named Brandon Tazewell. Upon examining the messages, detectives learned that 3 months prior to the incident, Ellie had shared shocking news with Brandon. Since Brandon was the last person known to have communicated with the victim, he became a subject of interest to the police. Further examination of their messages revealed that Ellie and Brandon had been in an on-and-off romantic relationship. Brandon Tazewell, a tall, dark-haired young man with an athletic build, was also a student at the University of Mississippi. He hailed from Fort Worth, Texas, and was raised in a well-mannered family. In 2016, as a freshman, Ellie met Brandon and immediately fell for him. The young people started dating, but they never officially declared themselves as a couple. While Ellie's feelings for Brandon were sincere, he never demonstrated the seriousness of his intentions towards her. Ellie's friends reported that their relationship was not always smooth. They often argued, including in public. Ellie and Brandon would periodically break up, but then they would be seen together again after some time. On April 12, 2019, Ellie wrote to Brandon that she had taken a pregnancy test and the result was positive, but she received no reply from him. She bombarded him with text and voice messages, but her boyfriend ignored her. Exactly 3 months later, he finally responded, "I don't want a child at all. Seriously, it will ruin my life. I can't help you with this and I don't plan to. It's still very early. Just take a pill or make a doctor's appointment and deal with the issue." Ellie, deeply in love, desperately wanted to meet in person to discuss the situation, but Brandon continually refused. On the fateful Friday of July 19th, Ellie went to a local bar with her friends. At 11:52 p.m., surveillance cameras captured her leaving the bar. She got into a taxi and went home. About 30 minutes later, she received a call. It was Brandon. At 1:58 a.m. on July 20th, Ellie got into Tazewell's car for her last ride. They headed to an abandoned fishing camp by Sardis Lake. According to police reports, the drive down the dark road to the location was supposed to take about 45 minutes. Witnesses reported clearly hearing gunshots in that area between 2:15 and 2:30 a.m. Investigators contacted Brandon Tazewell on Sunday afternoon and asked him to come to the station to talk about Ellie Costial. He found some convincing reasons to avoid coming, but assured the detectives he would meet them on Monday at 8:30 a.m. on Monday, July 22, 2019. After Brandon Tazewell failed to appear at the police station, investigators began to track his phone. Location data showed that Brandon was heading to his home in Fort Worth, Texas. Authorities issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, for his pickup, which had a distinctive license plate with TAC 3IT. They also alerted all nearby police stations, and the suspect was arrested when he stopped at a gas station in Memphis. 2 days later, 22-year-old Brandon Tazewell was placed in a local jail and charged with homicide. Tazewell's lawyer and father claimed he was innocent. As the Oxford community grappled with the violent loss of one of their own, Ellie Costial's death quickly captured the nation's attention. Reporters eager to learn more about the student and the person charged with her death flocked to Oxford from across the country. Brandon Tazewell insisted on his innocence until the end, but the evidence against him was more than sufficient. During his arrest, a gun matching the caliber used in the shooting near the lake was found in his possession. His car contained stained clothing, later determined by forensic analysis to be bloodstains belonging to the victim. It was established that after July 12th, Brandon had left Oxford to go home to Texas to retrieve his father's gun, allowing the prosecution to argue that the act was premeditated. His internet search history contained queries such as abortion services and abortion pills. It was later found that each time he agreed to meet Ellie, he canceled at the last minute or failed to show up without explanation. His search history also included queries on how to avoid punishment for a crime, how to conceal a crime, and how to use a weapon. A letter addressed to his parents was discovered in Tazewell's apartment stating, "I am not a good person. This is not your fault. Something in me just doesn't work. I've always had terrible thoughts. I've always had these feelings. I just felt out of place. I think this is the end for me. I'll either go to jail or die. I know I'll get caught." On August 30th, 2019, a grand jury charged Brandon Tazewell with the life-taking of Alexandria Costial. Yet again, he refused to accept responsibility for the incident. Brandon faced the ultimate penalty, capital punishment. However, the trial was postponed due to the widely known restrictions in place at the time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On August 27, 2021, when the process resumed, Brandon Tazewell, advised by his lawyer, pleaded guilty to mitigate the potential punishment. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. In his final statement, Brandon apologized to Ellie's parents. "My actions have forever changed your life, and the life of my family. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I pray for God's forgiveness, and I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me too," he said. Cindy Costial, Ellie's mother, did not accept Brandon's apology, stating that he should spend the rest of his life in prison and that every time his cell door slammed shut, he should remember the heinous act he committed. Investigator Jarrett Bundren eventually disclosed some already known facts about such a brazen crime to the public. He explained, "Ellie had told Brandon she thought she was pregnant. Brandon didn't want her to keep the baby, and the couple had many arguments about it. Although Ellie wanted to meet in person to discuss the situation, Brandon refused to do so until the day of the incident. Intent on questioning Brandon, the police asked him to come to the station for some inquiries. However, the suspect seemed to resist and continued to make excuses for not being able to come in. Alarmed, the police began tracking his cell phone and realized that Brandon was heading to his home in Fort Worth, Texas. Immediately after locating Brandon, authorities alerted all police departments in the vicinity, and the suspect was arrested when he stopped to refuel at a gas station in Memphis. Upon his arrest, authorities found blood on him. Moreover, a pistol was found in his truck. the caliber of which matched the weapon used in Ellie's demise. Although Brandon insisted on his innocence and claimed he had no part in the incident, the police ultimately charged him with the crime. 5 days after Ellie's passing, normalcy had yet to return to Funky's bar, where surveillance cameras had captured her leaving shortly before midnight on July 19th. Interviews with witnesses, who were among the last to see Ellie, revealed that the management had recently installed a camera right in front of the bar. A bartender, who preferred to remain anonymous, mentioned she had been friends with Ellie since school. Taking a break from her duties, she found the words to describe her friend. She always smiled. She just lit up the room. She had a smile from ear to ear, she said. Ellie was the kind of person who greeted everyone. It's just really sad. She was too kind, she said, looking away as the colorful disco lights danced on her face. We're going to miss her. Ellie's teacher and friend, who taught the Introduction to Retail course, Morgan Hall, learned about the passing of her student the following Monday. She was shocked. You never expect something like this to happen in Oxford and its surroundings. During the interrogation, Morgan mentioned the last time she saw Ellie around 1:15 p.m. on July 19th, when she submitted her test. She left, and I think that evening everything went downhill, she said. Ellie was a sweet girl, very quiet, and I liked having her in class, Morgan stated. After hearing about the student's demise, Morgan immediately went to the administrators to figure out the best way to deal with the situation. According to her, the university had students involved in suicides and fatal accidents, but this was something new. Morgan Hall briefly mentioned Ellie's passing in class. Counselors were ready to assist and were available on campus during that period. Anyone who wanted to postpone their final exams for a few days could do so if they needed time to grieve. My heart goes out to her parents and all her friends, she said. Parents shouldn't have to bury their children. That's not how it's supposed to work. As it turned out, Ellie Kostiel, in her need for support, had told friends that she was pregnant with Brandon Theisfeld's child. Her sisters knew she was pregnant and that she had told Brandon, said a classmate. He was very upset about it, about how it would ruin his life and future. He was angry that she wouldn't have an abortion. She said, "No, I don't believe in that." Another friend mentioned Ellie tried to end her pregnancy through unhealthy methods, like long walks, drinking a lot, and using forbidden substances. She was 17 weeks along. She was struggling with it. Brandon knew about it, but he was seeing someone else. He wanted her to end the pregnancy. I think morally she didn't want to, said Ellie's close friends. He was terrible, and then she would break up with him. Or he would break up with her in anger, and then come back to her saying, I'm sorry. And she always took him back. Ellie Kostial's shocked friends and classmates struggled to cope with the news and paid tribute to their friend on social media. It's just hard for me because when I see her face, all I can think about is what she went through, what she thought, what she said her friend Anna Pasco. It's very, very difficult. On Twitter, one of Ellie's classmates wrote on July 23rd that for years, they had to listen to Ellie and discuss in detail the issues between her and Brandon. He pursued her for many years, using her for his own interests during that time. I spent countless nights holding Ellie, wiping her tears as she cried over this monster for many years, said the now deleted post. You deserve hell, a disgusting excuse for a person. Rex Ravita, a former dorm neighbor of Theisfeld's, shared in an interview that the 22-year-old was a daddy's boy, who said he had been seeing Ellie Kostiel off and on for many years, just for the sake of not being bored. I genuinely believe he emotionally manipulated her into believing he loved her just as she did him, and I think he kept her on the hook until the very last second, said Ravita. Ole Miss student Rex Ravita, a former dorm neighbor of suspect Brandon Theisfeld, later described the alleged perpetrator as misogynistic and arrogant, stating, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He was very much a daddy's boy. Always had to mention his father's money, how his dad could get him out of anything. Just that kind of attitude all the time. Any vulgar comment he could make, any crude remark towards anyone in our dorm, he got away with. On Thursday evening in her hometown of St. Louis, A memorial service was held for Ellie Costial. At the request of the Costials, no public statements were made in Oxford about memorial events. Only black ribbons encircling the majestic white columns of the women's houses, including Alpha Phi where Ellie lived, served as a reminder of the tragedy. The young student's demise unsettled the entire state. Michael Cunningham, a resident of Oxford, mentioned that the case has caught everyone's attention on campus. "This is the biggest news in town since football season for a long time," said Cunningham. "It's just terrible." He expressed hope that the case could be resolved soon, so the Costial family could find peace. Despite the deliberate withholding of crucial facts for the sake of investigation confidentiality, some news agencies conducted thorough investigations and reported that surveillance cameras captured Costial on film early Saturday morning, near the location where her body was found. They reported seeing Ellie Costial with a man, who appears to be Theisfeld, at a 24-hour store in the Harmontown area. Arafat Najib, who has owned this store for about 10 years, mentioned that police officers came to the store on Sunday and asked to review the surveillance camera footage. Najib said that the investigators did not explain why they were there and took some evidence with them when they left. According to Najib, video footage is erased every 72 hours, so there's no way to go back and see what the cameras captured. The business owner stated, "We've never had any problems or violent incidents here. This is a small town. It's quiet. Everyone knows each other. This is just madness." The Lafayette County Sheriff's Office long refused to release any additional information about the progress of the investigation or to give interviews to the media. Rocky Kennedy, the Lafayette County coroner, mentioned that there's a reason officials are not saying much. "This isn't a story that everyone will see until it reaches court," he said. "Certain delicate details in this case are tools to ensure that the person who committed this act is brought before court, convicted, serves the appropriate sentence, and is held accountable for what they've done." Kennedy said the media attention on this case has been overwhelming, but it doesn't change the nature of his work. "Every case I handle is important," said the coroner. "I try to give the same attention to every family who's lost someone. They've lost someone they loved." Michelle Miller, also involved in investigating Ellie Costial's case, raised questions about missed warning signs in relationships and whether her demise could have been prevented. Brandon Theisfeld was charged with the crime. He faced the death penalty after being accused of Ellie Costial's demise and alleged abduction. Despite delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, justice was served. Eventually, in August 2021, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Judge Kelly Luther sentenced him to life imprisonment, and he will have the possibility of parole when he turns 65. Brandon Theisfeld is currently incarcerated in the Mississippi State Penitentiary in Sunflower County, Mississippi. At the trial, when the verdict was read, Brandon Theisfeld showed some emotions and sincerely admitted to his involvement in the demise of Ellie Costial. He acknowledged his guilt in the demise of Alexandria Costial and was very emotional when he apologized to both her family and his own. A significant fact in this case was the finding of the forensic examination, which established that Alexandria Costial had never been pregnant. We are left to speculate and ponder why a young and promising student at a popular university, who could have had a happy and fulfilling life, fabricated the existence of a non-existent child and spoke about it to all her friends for 3 months. It seems she sincerely believed in it and thought that this news would melt Brandon's heart and make it belong only to her. Unfortunately, a miracle did not occur. Her parents and friends are still mourning their dear Ellie. Sometimes, facing a harsh truth is better than the torment of not knowing. That's exactly what Maria Leone believed when her 16-year-old daughter vanished without a trace. Initially, everyone clung to the hope that the girl would be found alive. But time went on. Those hopes began to fade. Maria started praying that her daughter would be found, even if she wasn't alive, so she could lay her child to rest properly. Yet, no one anticipated how dreadful the resolution would turn out. The case involving the murder of young schoolgirl Melanie Stacy Amaya shook Colombia with its brutality and shocking outcome. The most horrifying element was that those involved were ordinary teenagers who had recently been romantically linked. Let's delve into this grim story from the beginning to understand how a love-struck boy transformed into a cold-blooded killer who executed his ex-girlfriend. We will also examine any adult oversights and consider whether this tragedy might have been preventable. Who was Melanie Stacy Amaya? Our focus today is on her life and untimely demise. Born on February 21, 2002, in the small town of San Rafael in northern Colombia, she was the eldest daughter in a modest family consisting of Maria Leon and William Amaya. 2 years later, they welcomed another daughter named Natalie. From an early age, both girls were very close-knit, sharing secrets and developing strong bonds with their mother. Melanie showed creative talents early on. She drew beautifully and had an innate passion for cosmetics. She loved painting her dolls' faces along with those of her mother and sister, and even friends, declaring she'd become a stylist and makeup artist someday. Academically gifted too, she did well at school, where teachers described her as talented and driven, qualities which made her both sociable and friendly. She could light up any room. Naturally charismatic, it wasn't surprising that Melanie had many friends inside and outside school. Her attractive appearance garnered attention, aided by her adept use of cosmetics. But life took a hard turn when Melanie turned 14. Her parents filed for divorce then, but managed to separate amicably while keeping warm relations intact. Father kept close ties with his daughters, offering both financial support and active involvement in their lives. About 6 months later, Maria started dating a man named Ruben Morales, whom she soon married. Following their wedding, the family relocated to Medellin, a major city in Colombia. Here, Ruben had secure employment, and the girls found ample opportunities for education and personal growth. The stepfather developed an excellent relationship with his teenage stepdaughters. He readily invested in their education and hobbies, ensuring the girls enjoyed a more comfortable life. Treating them as his own daughters, he surrounded them with care and attention. During high school, Melanie began exhibiting a challenging, somewhat rebellious nature. She became seriously interested in music and even contemplated leaving school to focus solely on this passion. Dreaming of becoming a DJ, she requested a mixing desk for her birthday. Additionally, she had several large tattoos on her arms, back, chest, and leg, bold and brightly colored. Her parents did not impede her quest for self-expression, but were shocked upon discovering that Melanie experimented with illegal substances. Beneath her unconventional behavior and appearance experiments was an individual who ultimately led to her demise. On her 14th birthday in 2016, Melanie decided to host a party inviting all her friends along with a DJ. Lacking funds for hiring a professional musician, but receiving contact information from acquaintances, Melanie reached out to 16-year-old Miguel Angel Perea, an aspiring yet talented disc jockey. After some deliberation, the birthday girl decided to call him. Miguel proved exceptionally talented and possessed notable charisma. He captivated young Melanie completely. Then, after celebrating her birthday, they continued communicating. Within weeks, teenagers were frequently seen together, strolling through parks or around the city streets. Melanie introduced him as her boyfriend. They quickly became inseparable while displaying mutual affection, holding hands tenderly, demonstrating their feelings openly wherever they went. Miguel came from quite modest, or rather poor means, but treated his young girlfriend respectfully and admirably. Captivated by both respect, genuinely almost instantly charming when meeting, introducing himself warmly towards parents, earning acceptance, fostering no interference, supporting relatio. Over time, he increasingly spent more time at the residence tied to his passport, integrating into the family dynamic. Miguel once confided in the girl's parents about difficulties at home. His mother disapproved of his involvement in music lessons, leading to a conflict that ended with him being physically harmed and subsequently evicted from his home. Maria offered him shelter temporarily until things could stabilize, not realizing the potential implications of introducing a disruptive influence into their family environment. Consequently, Melanie and Miguel began cohabitating. Initially, they experienced a harmonious period lasting 6 months, during which both teenagers appeared elated by their newfound togetherness. However, as time progressed, Miguel revealed aspects of his character that had an adverse impact on Melanie. Her academic performance deteriorated noticeably, her behavior and appearance became increasingly provocative. Additionally, she started adorning herself with tattoos and expressed intentions to abandon school. With time, disagreements between the couple became frequent. While they initially attempted to resolve these conflicts outside the family home, such disputes eventually occurred openly within it. A significant concern for Maria arose upon discovering that her eldest daughter was involved in illegal substance use supplied by Miguel. In response to this revelation, Maria initiated a serious conversation with Melanie, who admitted tearfully to limited experimentation with drugs and promised never to engage in such behavior again. Despite deciding it was best for Miguel to leave due to his negative influence on their daughter, Melanie intervened on his behalf, assuredly promising improved conduct for both herself and Miguel moving forward. Reluctantly acquiescing after some deliberation proved to be another misstep for Maria and Ruben, as troubling signs soon emerged. Unexplained bruises on their daughter's body were evident, but consistently attributed by Melanie, either sports activities or clumsiness, rather than implicating her boyfriend's actions. 6 months later, a significant incident occurred. During a heated argument, Miguel assaulted the girl so severely that she needed medical attention. Maria wanted to file a police report for assault and bodily harm, but Melanie discouraged her, stating she would deny everything and refuse to accuse her partner. Melanie's parents tried to separate the couple and forbid them from living together. However, Melanie threatened to run away with him if their relationship was obstructed in any manner. This toxic relationship persisted for over 2 years until Melanie recognized it was detrimental to her well-being. In early May 2018, another intense quarrel erupted between the teenagers, escalating into physical violence. This time, Melanie took initiative and told Miguel their relationship was over. She demanded he pack his belongings and leave her home immediately, or she would contact the police about the abuse she endured. Miguel complied with her demands, but later asked for forgiveness. Despite this, he could not let go emotionally. Miguel began stalking Melanie, tracking her movements and monitoring whom she interacted with, and he regularly called and messaged her. His messages ranged from declarations of love and apologies to death threats. Concerned about this obsessive behavior, Ruben sought a restraining order against Miguel for the safety of his stepdaughter. Nevertheless, law enforcement dismissed his concerns, seeing no threat in what they perceived as teenage drama. Maria also reached out to the prosecutor's office, citing potential danger posed by Miguel. However, authorities did not take her seriously either. They assumed incorrectly that an 18-year-old young man wouldn't harm his ex-partner, a belief rooted in unfamiliarity with his true nature. Mysterious disappearance of a schoolgirl. Almost 2 months had passed since the couple's separation. Miguel seemed to have calmed down and was no longer looking for meetings with Melanie. The girl lived her old life. Her grades at school improved noticeably. She met with friends and practiced music. Her parents also no longer had reason to worry. They tried to cross out the former boyfriend of their daughter from their memory and forget him like a bad dream. On June 28, 2018, Melanie was excited to attend a birthday party for her close friend. The event was scheduled to take place at one of the city's most popular nightclubs. To ensure she looked stunning, Melanie meticulously prepared herself by selecting an outfit, applying makeup, and styling her hair. Once she felt ready, she said goodbye to her mother and assured her she'd be back not too late before leaving in a waiting cab. Maria trusted her daughter's friends well enough not to worry excessively. However, the next morning brought concern when Maria realized that Melanie had not returned home. She attempted to contact Melanie but discovered that her phone was turned off, a distressing sign. Despite this, Maria tried to stay calm by telling herself that the teenagers might have simply lost track of time and that Melanie's phone battery could be dead. Around lunchtime, Maria called Isaac and was shocked to hear that Melanie never arrived at the party. None of their friends had seen or heard from her either. Frantic with worry, Maria began calling all of Melanie's friends and classmates. Unfortunately, no one could provide any useful information about her whereabouts since she left the house. In response, Maria promptly contacted William, Melanie's father, and he rushed over immediately. Together with Ruben, the stepfather, they went to file a missing persons report at the police station. However, they encountered bureaucratic indifference as authorities noted that it is necessary to wait 24 hours and suggested that Melanie might just be asleep at a friend's place post-party. Refusing to waste precious time waiting passively for answers, the parents along with Ruben decided on taking swift action themselves. They mobilized relatives and friends in their search efforts by contacting all known acquaintances and visiting familiar places where she might have gone, while also distributing hundreds of flyers around the city, hoping for leads on Melanie's location. The next story we're sharing is about the Miller case. Bruce Miller was truly a kind man who carried the full weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He worked tirelessly, often without rest, to support his family, never holding back. His life was dedicated to making his wife happy. He was her supporter, her protector, and her source of stability. But in a cruel twist of fate, instead of being rewarded for his dedication and love, he became the victim of a ruthless crime. Bruce fell prey to the dark side of the internet. His feelings for Cherie grew after he hired her and helped raise 3 children with her. They eventually fell in love 2 years later, and this emotion completely consumed him. Bruce decided to adopt her children to create a united family and home for them all together. However, Cherie concealed her true intentions. While Bruce believed in their bright future together, she led a double life and deceived him. The computer Bruce bought for Cherie turned out to be more than just a gift. It became an instrument in her dreadful scheme. Instead of using it for business growth, she used it to plan his murder. Cherie came to realize that divorce wouldn't bring her desired wealth, and so she resorted to drastic measures by manipulating Bruce's feelings and using him as an instrument in her cruel plot. This case could be seen as one of its kind, a pioneering example where online interactions played a critical role in criminal activity. Perhaps this marked one of the first instances when internet communication became pivotal in legal proceedings. A fascinating development indeed. In today's era, such cases are increasingly common compared to times when the internet was nascent and people were unaware that everything they did online could be tracked or restored. Cherie, like many others at that time, had no idea that deleted messages could be recovered later on. It also highlighted how dangerous it is chatting with strangers online and just how much one's life can change due to this form of communication. There are always individuals who find themselves unexpectedly at center stage, plunged into worlds full mysteries, intrigue. And Bruce surely counted among those people, a person whose story is packed with secrets, unexpected turns. Born on July 26, 1951 in Flint, Michigan, during younger years, Bruce worked as mechanic General Motors factory, but later changed course, opening own business salvage yard, deal-told cars reselling spare parts despite handling large cash sums, dealing different social groups, still known generous, kind-hearted individuals. Sometimes he even bent law falsifying license plates. Though rarely done, didn't have many romantic relationships. Followed marriages, both ending divorce, finally meeting fate, bringing final love. Cherie Miller. Cherie often displayed unusual habits, behavior, according to her friends. She would act as if she were creating a new identity on the internet while engaging in flirtatious conversations with strangers. People's opinions were divided. Some believed Bruce was aware of it, but chose to ignore it, finding easier to maintain the status quo. Bruce valued his marriage and cherished the stability provided by Cherie, along with his efforts to adopt her 3 children. Cherie also aimed to preserve their marital bond. She had affection for Bruce and appreciated the appealing lifestyle he offered, even after she had misused his credit cards shortly following their wedding. This did not perturb Bruce much. Their relationship was as volatile as Cherie's personal life itself. They maintained a working routine during the day and spent intimate moments at night. Amid this familial bliss, Cherie's online alter ego began to emerge alongside her growing confidence. Her chat interactions became increasingly explicit, often focusing on sexual topics with various men under different aliases such as Horny 24-21, Love Me Slowly, and I Want to Be Seduced. Rather than sticking with consistent contacts, she preferred engaging with new individuals once boredom set in, initiating cycles of flirting anew each time. As per her own explanation, these interactions were mere playful engagements, a game wherein each new man represented another level of progress that boosted her sense of invincibility. This detached mentality eventually led Cherie down a detrimental path. Amidst her frequent online activities, Cherie encountered Jerry Cassidy, a former police officer residing in Reno, Nevada, and they quickly developed romantic feelings for each other. It seemed Jerry held a special place for Cherie in contrast to previous online acquaintances. Eventually, they even renamed their accounts, Cherie adopting Jerry's Fool, while Jerry took on Cherie's Fool. Their digital exchanges encompassed everything from casual texting and flirting to sharing nude photographs and exchanging sexually suggestive messages and videos featuring explicit content involving Cherie herself. One must remember that all these exchanges took place back in 1999, when executing such actions involved significantly more complexity compared to today's technological advancements. Jerry was born on October 6, 1960, in Kansas City, Missouri. From a young age, he was passionate about hunting and harbored of joining the FBI. He planned to achieve this by starting with the Montana police. Jerry served as a detective in the homicide department for 9 years, eventually rising to the rank of lieutenant. However, by the end of his tenure, things took a troubling turn. While investigating one case, Jerry uncovered several fraudulent documents within the department. It was clearly an inside job. Acting responsibly, he reported these findings to his superior. Unfortunately, word got out among his colleagues. They branded him a snitch and ostracized him, jeopardizing his career. The situation escalated until it became evident that he was no longer welcome there. After being demoted, Jerry chose to resign from his position in 1994. This had a profoundly negative impact on him. Consequently, he began struggling with alcohol and substance addiction while also battling depression. Not long after these events unfolded, Jerry's wife divorced him. This divorce further affected him as it resulted in losing visitation rights with their son. Despite these setbacks, Jerry managed to reclaim some stability by taking up employment as a security officer at Harrah's Kansas City Hotel and Casino. In 1999, he relocated to Reno and found work at another casino there. During this period, Jerry met Cherie through an online platform and soon transitioned their relationship into real-life interactions. Rather than viewing the relationship as a passionate affair, Cherie started to exploit Jerry. Her influence over him became evident to those who knew him well. He observed that Jerry seemed to exhibit symptoms akin to bipolar disorder. He was highly enthusiastic when Cherie was around and deeply despondent in her absence. It wasn't long before Cherie began her deceitful manipulations. In September, she falsely declared that she was pregnant with Jerry's child. Shortly after, she claimed that she had miscarried due to Bruce allegedly beating her, though this was entirely untrue. Bruce, in reality, was a diligent family man and not the dangerous individual Cherie depicted him as. Jerry, unaware of the truth, became exceedingly angry. Losing his supposed unborn child and believing Cherie was subjected to violence were unbearable for him, a lot for anyone. Concurrently, Cherie dissuaded Jerry from confronting Bruce by claiming Bruce had significant influential connections and substantial wealth that would ensure they faced retribution if they acted against him. Just 1 month later, Cherie fabricated another story about being pregnant with twins. One crucial detail is that in 1995, Cherie underwent a tubal ligation procedure, which rendered her unable to conceive, but she never disclosed this information to Jerry. This shocking disclosure underscores the extent of deception involved in their relationship. On November 5, 1999, Jerry received a disturbing email that was purportedly from Bruce. The message stated that Cherie was gaining weight due to the 2 unborn children she was carrying and expressed her desire for an abortion to lose the extra pounds. Jerry, filled with anxiety, attempted to reach out to Cherie, but could only manage a brief text conversation in which she mentioned needing to leave for a few days. The following day brought another message, supposedly from Bruce. This time it informed Jerry that Cherie would be returning home soon and implied that the abortion had been completed successfully. However, it also indicated that Cherie would no longer be able to conceive. Enclosed in this communication was a staged photograph showing Cherie covered in bruises. Jerry experienced overwhelming rage. He contacted Cherie the next day, and they concluded that the only solution was to eliminate Bruce. They meticulously planned their approach: routes, a parking spot, and the best location and time for executing their plan at the yard. Driven by his mounting anger, Jerry departed from his home towards Michigan that same evening. As Bruce prepared to leave work later, he received a call from Cherie asking him if he could pick up pizza on his way back, a distraction integral to their plot. Engaged in this phone conversation, Bruce did not notice when Jerry approached him from behind and pointed a .20 caliber gun at him before pulling the trigger. Having committed the crime, Jerry returned home while Cherie set into motion their next phase of cover-up activities. She contacted Bruce's brother, Chuck, expressing concern about Bruce's failure to return home yet. Subsequently, alarmed by her worry, which she feigned, Chuck and his wife rushed over to investigate at the yard, where they discovered Bruce's body with horror before dialing authorities. The authorities first suspected a robbery. Bruce's old friend, John Hutchinson, was their primary suspect right away. John owed his employer over $5,000 and had previously been involved with Shaw. His alibi was weak and he failed the polygraph test. No surprise the police had their doubts about him. Consequently, John was detained for questioning, but due to insufficient evidence, he was eventually released. Subsequently, the case went cold. Officers initially deemed Cherie's behavior after her husband's death appropriate. They were unaware of what she concealed at the time. Shortly thereafter, she was seen enjoying parties frequently. Moreover, then, she swiftly secured an insurance payout, sold off the business, and withdrew funds from family accounts, thus becoming wealthy overnight. Amidst her festivities and expenditures, she invited her new partner to reside in the house formerly shared with Bruce. Jerry and Cherie's relationship fell apart abruptly after Bruce's death. That was when Jerry discovered Cherie had fallen for another man. He started to feel immense guilt and reflected on the dreadful crime he had committed alongside her. Having worked for the police for many years, Jerry quickly discerned that he was merely a pawn in Cherie's scheme. She manipulated his emotions to eliminate her husband. It dawned on him that Bruce was truly an innocent man. None of the accusations Cherie had fabricated involved abuse, affiliations, beatings, or children. Even the pictures presented as evidence were dated 1994. 3 months later, on February 11th, Jerry Cassidy chose to end his life. He was found alone in the apartment he rented from his cousin, with a .22 caliber rifle beside him. Among his belongings were letters to his family and a note and briefcase addressed to his lawyer, John O'Connor. When John opened the briefcase, he discovered clear evidence of a crime that sealed Cherie's fate. In addition to various pieces of evidence unearthed after Jerry's death, there was also a note where Jerry confessed to killing Bruce and placed all blame squarely on Cherie. The note outlined how all available evidence would be handed over to the police. Jerry expressed deep regret and acknowledged his foolishness in being manipulated by Cherie into committing such an act. He revealed that everyone would now understand why he descended into depression. He had been unable to reveal the truth until now. Jerry also claimed that Cherie aimed solely at securing money and eliminating her husband. She succeeded in her goal, but disregarded the harm caused along the way. Following this startling revelation, authorities swiftly apprehended Cherie and charged her with second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The trial commenced 10 months later, on December 12th. Given the nature of her internet-related crime, public curiosity was exceptionally high. Cherie pleaded not guilty during the proceedings, and her defense attorney suggested that Jerry had fabricated his evidence against her out of guilt. They also attempted to shift the blame back onto JN. During the trial, disturbing messages between Cherie and JN were presented, wherein they discussed using a firearm. It was highlighted that a day after her husband's death, she altered her first name, last name, and address. After Jerry's demise, she repeated this action. The case concluded successfully in court, and after only 2 days of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Cherie Miller was found guilty of second-degree murder, and on January 9, 2001, she received a life sentence in prison. However, several complaints arose from the defense regarding the trial. One notable issue questioned the admissibility of Jerry's letter as evidence. This concern led to such significant implications that 7 years later, in 2008, a judge ordered a retrial for the case. Consequently, as per federal court decisions, Cherie was released from prison in July 2009 until further trials could be conducted. For over 3 years, she walked free without restrictions, even accessing internet and dating sites. However, many individuals, especially Bruce's and Jerry's families, opposed this release, deeming it due to an absurd technicality. Back in August 2012, the district court reversed its decision, and Cherie returned to prison, where she has remained since. While she was at large, Cherie successfully reconnected with her children. This reconnection had a notably positive impact on her. In April 2016, she wrote a letter admitting guilt despite previously denying it. She explained that her initial denial stemmed from fear that an admission would hinder her chances of appealing for a retrial. Her attorneys had advised such action. However, they later denied this claim. They asserted that if they had known about her guilt earlier, they would have recommended pursuing a plea deal. Under such circumstances, Cherie would have faced only 15 years of imprisonment, as opposed to the longer term she is currently serving. By then, Cherie had already spent 2 decades behind bars. Notably, during this time, she entered into her 4th marriage with Michael Denoy. Michael learned about her story through media reports and became interested in her situation, eventually proposing during their first meeting.
Every relationship of a person is based on the pillar of trust, whether it's between parents and children, husband and wife, or even between boyfriend and girlfriend. But if someone breaks the trust of another person in these essential relationships and starts thinking badly about them, it feels really terrible. And today's case is somewhat similar, where a boy and a girl from Pakistan were very happy in their relationship. But then, after some time, the girl breaks up because she started seeing a dark side of her boyfriend. But then, what the boy did with his girlfriend shook the entire Pakistan. Shaukat Ali Muqaddam was not only a normal citizen of Pakistan, but also a diplomat and ambassador of Pakistan. Due to this, he had to live in different countries. However, in 2021, he was living in Islamabad, Pakistan. Apart from this, at one point, Shaukat Ali had also been Pakistan's ambassador to South Korea and Kazakhstan. Because of this, he held a very high position in Pakistan. There were a total of 5 people in his family, including Shaukat Muqaddam, his wife Kausar Muqaddam, 2 daughters and 1 son. October 23, 1993, was the day when a beautiful girl was born in Shaukat Ali's house, whom they named Noor. Noor was a healthy and cute baby who always laughed and never bothered anyone too much. Although Shaukat's professional life was very busy and stressful, but when he came home, he spent quality time with his family. As a result, his children had a very good upbringing. From school days, Noor had a great interest in studying. She always used to read either school books or other books. Now, because Shaukat Muqaddam was a diplomat, he used to get transferred to other countries due to his work, which is why Noor started her schooling from Ireland. Then she completed high school from South Korea. After South Korea, the family moved to Kazakhstan. But Noor thinks about completing her college in the US, where her older sister Sarah also lived. However, after the US, Noor returned to Pakistan, Islamabad. As humble and smart as Noor was in her childhood, she was equally humble and smart in her adult years. That's why everyone at home trusted Noor and easily accepted her decisions. Besides, Noor loved animals, especially stray dogs and cats. She used to feed them whenever she had time. Although Noor belonged to a wealthy family, she never had a liking for materialistic things. By hearing all these things, you must have understood that Noor was a kind-hearted, down-to-earth, intelligent and confident girl. Along with all these things, Noor also had a great passion for art and calligraphy. She often made religious paintings too. As I mentioned, coming from a wealthy diplomat family, parties were a common occurrence at the diplomats' homes. So Shaukat Muqaddam often took his family to such parties because they were excellent for networking and building connections. It was at one such party in 2018 that Noor met a boy named Zahir Jaffer. Zahir and Noor are both going to be key characters in this case. So before we proceed, let's take a brief look at Zahir's background. Zahir Jaffer was born in the USA, but he spent his childhood and teenage years in Pakistan. After that, Zahir pursued his graduation in the US and also spent some time living in the UK. Zahir's father was Zakir Jaffer, who was a very successful businessman. Due to his father's business ventures, the Jaffer family was one of the wealthiest families in Pakistan. The Jaffer family had various businesses, including healthcare, oil, real estate, and construction. This also provided them with opportunities to work with their country's military. One of these companies is Ahmed Jaffer and Company, where Zahir Jaffer is now the CEO, while his father, Zakir Jaffer, used to oversee the company. But after some time, Zahir's mood changed, and he started working as a therapist at a company called Therapy Works. In this company, Zahir used to listen to the children of the school and explain to them about mental health care. He also used to arrange lectures and presentations for the children. But the shocking thing here is that Zahir himself was an introverted and angry since childhood. He also had very few friends, and he rarely attended parties with them. But it is at one such party that he meets Noor, and he likes her, and Noor also enjoys talking to Zahir. Perhaps this happened because their personalities were different, and people say that opposite personalities are attracted to each other. However, both their families already knew each other because they used to attend such parties. But friendship between Noor and Zahir developed from this party. Then, after some time, this friendship turned into love, and they both entered into a romantic relationship. However, it's not like they kept this fact hidden from their parents or friends. Rather, both their families and friends knew that Zahir and Noor were dating. Both families were happy because Noor completes Zahir and Zahir completes Noor. Actually, Noor brought out a side of Zahir that no one had seen before, whereas Zahir used to be very introverted before. But as soon as he met Noor, his personality began to change gradually. He started enjoying his life, hanging out with people, and at one party, people were surprised to see Zahir dancing with Noor, including Zahir's family, because they had never thought they would see this side of Zahir's personality. Everything was going well, but as the relationship grew older, things started to deteriorate. Initially, everything was going well in the relationship. Both were enjoying themselves, and their families were also very happy. But then, after some time, a different side of Zahir came out in front of Noor. Actually, Noor later finds out that Zahir is a very aggressive and abusive man. Allegedly, Zahir had physically and mentally abused Noor several times. Not only that, Zahir had also raised his hand against his own mother before. As a result, after almost 3 years of relationship, when Noor couldn't bear Zahir anymore, she broke up with him at the beginning of 2021. In both families, there was dissatisfaction over their children ending the relationship. Because neither of them was a normal family, and in such affluent households, it's not typical for a boy and a girl to enter a relationship, break up shortly after, and then enter into a relationship with someone else later. In fact, People like them also see relationships as a business. Like most wealthy families, they marry off their sons or daughters where they can profit. But besides that, Zahir was also displeased that Noor left him, and now he took it as an affront to his male ego. However, after some time, Zahir also started thinking about moving on, and then he thought he would go back to the U.S. and settle there because he also had U.S. citizenship along with Pakistani citizenship. Now let's jump to July 18th, 2021. On this day, Zahir booked a taxi to go to Islamabad International Airport. Actually, according to Pakistan Standard Time, Zahir's flight to New York was at 3:50 a.m. on July 19th. He had already packed his bags and informed his family about it. But before leaving, he wanted to meet Noor just once, so he called Noor on the evening of July 18th. At that time, Noor was at her home, preparing for Eid with her family. Now, Zahir called Noor and requested, "I am leaving this country for New York, and I will never come back here again, but I will settle in the U.S., so please meet me once before I leave." Additionally, Zahir told Noor, "Come to my house, we'll meet, and then when I leave for the airport from my house, I'll drop you off at your home first." Although these two had already broken up, before that they had been in a relationship for 3 years, which led Noor to say yes to meeting Zahir. After that, at 9:05 p.m., Noor leaves her house. But she doesn't tell her family that she's going to Zahir's house. She just says she's going to her friend's house and will be back soon. Around 10 p.m., Noor arrives outside Zahir's house at the scent location in Sector F74. But strange things start happening from here. Now, as I told you, Zahir's flight was at 3:50 a.m., but between 10 and 11 p.m., Zahir calls his travel agency multiple times. Zahir called his travel agency and started asking them very strange questions like, "What would happen if I don't board this flight? Will I get my refund back? If I decide to book tickets again after 10 days, what will happen?" Sometime later, Zahir called his travel agency again and said that now I'm not canceling my ticket, but I've decided to go to the U.S. on this flight. But let me tell you, during this time, Noor was inside his house with him. But for her, this house was a new place because she had never been here before. Afterward, the taxi that Zahir had booked to go to the airport also arrives outside Jathar's house at exactly 11 p.m. However, Zahir doesn't come out of the house for half an hour. Meanwhile, the taxi driver called Zahir 2 or 3 times, but Zahir told him to wait, saying, "I'll be there in just 5 minutes." However, at 12:07 a.m., he calls the taxi driver again and says, "My plan to go to the airport is canceled now. Anyway, if we leave for the airport now, I won't be able to catch my flight." Despite waiting for more than an hour, Zahir pays the taxi driver half the fare. Actually, Zahir had booked this taxi for 2,000 Pakistani rupees. Now, after that, the taxi driver leaves from there. But at 1:40 a.m., Zahir calls the taxi driver again and asks him to come back to his house. Now, the taxi driver also returns to Zahir's house because he knew he would get the full payment. But this time too, Zahir made the taxi driver wait outside the house for a few minutes, and then at 2:15 a.m., Zahir comes out with his luggage. But the strange thing this time was that Noor was also with him, and she didn't have sandals on her feet, which the driver found very strange. However, what struck him as even strange was that Zahir was talking to Noor during the car ride, but Noor wasn't responding to his words. Although the driver didn't pay much attention to this at the time, halfway through, Zahir told the driver, "Now take the car back towards home anyway. We're already very late. I don't think we'll make it to the airport on time and catch the flight." After that, the taxi driver drops them off again at Jaffar's house at 2:35 a.m. But as soon as Noor got out of the taxi, Zahir pulled her inside the house. According to the taxi driver's statement, he felt like Noor wasn't supposed to go back inside the house with Zahir, but Zahir forcefully took her inside. Then, on July 19th, Noor stayed at Zahir's house the whole day, and then July 20th arrived, which was the day of Eid. Noor had come to Zahir's house to meet him on July 18th at 9:05 p.m., but now it had been more than 24 hours, and Noor's father and mother had returned home after shopping for Eid. But when they find out that their daughter has been missing from home for 24 hours, at 12:57 a.m. on July 20th, Shaukat Mukaddam texts his daughter, asking her where she is. However, Noor doesn't reply to that text message. Then, at 5:48 a.m., Noor's mother messages her, and two family friends also call Noor, yet there is no response from Noor. This causes worry for Noor's parents, and they were about to inform the police about it. But at 10:43 a.m., Noor sends a voice recording to her mother. However, the contents of that recording were never made public, but it was the last time Noor's mother, Kausar Mukaddam, heard her daughter's voice. But after sending the voice message, another strange thing happens. Zahir immediately calls Noor's mother from his own phone and tells her that Noor is not at his house, trying to prove that he hasn't even seen Noor. Then, from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. that same day, Zahir repeatedly calls his father, Zakir Jaffer. However, at around 7:10 p.m., Noor is seen on CCTV cameras. But by that time, her condition was very bad, and it seemed as though Zahir had tortured her severely. In the CCTV footage, Noor is seen jumping from the balcony of Zahir's house on the first floor and falling directly onto an iron grill. This caused her to sustain an injury to her abdomen, which is why she is seen holding her stomach in this clip. She was actually distressed by Zahir's harassment and wanted to leave the house. However, the security guard closed the gate, and meanwhile Zahir also jumps from the balcony to catch Noor and brings her back inside. But as he was bringing her back, Noor falls down, but Zahir drags her inside. Now, I should tell you that it wasn't just Zahir and Noor inside the house. There was also a security guard, a cook, and a gardener. But none of them helped Noor. In fact, from July 18th to July 20th, Noor attempted to escape from this house 6 times. But each time, one of Zahir's servants informed him, and Noor was always caught. But this time, because of Noor's attempt to escape, Zahir becomes very angry. After bringing Noor back inside, he calls his father once again around 7:30 p.m. But since then, Zahir didn't call anyone for 30 minutes, because in the meantime, Zahir first attempts to shoot Noor with his handgun, but as soon as he presses the trigger, his gun jams. However, even after that, Zahir doesn't stop wanting to kill Noor. It was already in his mind. So he takes out a Swiss knife and starts stabbing every part of Noor's body. Meanwhile, Noor scratches Zahir's face and arms with her nails, but after some time, Noor's condition deteriorates so much that she faints. Noor was unconscious, but even then, Zahir kept stabbing her with the knife. Afterward, he grabs Noor by the throat and keeps squeezing until Noor's last breath is gone. Later, Noor's post-mortem report reveals that she died due to lack of oxygen, but before killing Noor, Zahir ripped her several times. But Zahir didn't stop there. After Noor's death, he pulled out his knife and started cutting Noor's throat, and finally, he severed her head from her body. After killing Noor, Zahir quickly calls his father and friends, saying, "Thieves have broken into our house, and I need help." At the same time, some of Zahir's friends head towards his house. However, Zahir's father wasn't there. That's why he called the CEO of the company where Zahir worked, named Therapy Works, and said, "Quickly go to my house and save my son at any cost." In reality, Zahir's father, Zakir Jaffer, called the CEO of that company because they needed to erase all evidence of Noor's murder by going to Zahir. Moreover, the CEO of the company had to comply because Zahir's father was funding the company. Around 8:30 p.m., Tahir Zahur, the CEO of Therapy Works, arrives outside Zahir's house with his 6 employees. Additionally, some of Zahir's friends were also present. However, the door of Zahir's house remained closed, so Tahir took a ladder and, with his employees, entered through the window on the first floor. But as soon as they reached the first floor, Zahir attacked one of the employees with a knife, piercing through his chin and tongue. Zahir was extremely angry at that moment, so 5 to 6 people quickly grabbed him to control him. After this, Zahir's hands were tied behind his back, and ropes were also tied around his feet. But as soon as the people went inside Zahir's room from the balcony, they were stunned. In fact, There was blood everywhere on the floor, even on the walls of the room. Then they saw Noor's body in the center of the room, but her head was 3 feet away from her body. Now, everyone inside the room was astonished to regain control over Zahir, and after seeing Noor's dead body. But in the meantime, the neighbors were also quite alert, because when Zahir was being caught, he was screaming a lot, which made his neighbors call the police. After that, the police arrived there, and then on July 20th, around 10 o'clock at night, the police called Shaukat Mukadarm to inform him that his daughter had been murdered. Hearing this sad news, Mukadarm's family home was engulfed in mourning because their youngest and dearest daughter was no longer in this world. But Noor's family knew who had done all this, and now they wanted to punish Zahir according to Pakistan law, meaning the death penalty. After that, the police arrested Zahir, but now they were worried about how Zahir would confess his crime. But Zahir did something very strange here too. As soon as the police caught Zahir, he confessed in a short while that he was the one who had killed Noor, and he had done so because he loved Noor very much. He had even proposed marriage to Noor, but she had rejected his marriage proposal and later broke up with him. This hurt Zahir's ego, so he booked his and Noor's one-way tickets to New York for July 19th. But before this, Zahir had decided that if Noor agreed to go to New York with him, they would get married and settle in New York. But if Noor didn't agree, he would kill her. However, from July 18th to 20th, Zahir tried to convince Noor for marriage, but when Noor refused to marry him, Zahir finally assaulted her very brutally. Although all the servants in Zahir's house knew what Zahir did with Noor, none of them tried to stop him even once, not even daring to call the police, because they were afraid that if they did, Zahir would not spare them. Now, even though Zahir had confessed his crime in front of the police, when the case went to court, he was behaving strangely in court. Firstly, he entered the court looking disheveled as if he hadn't bathed for days. Besides, he shouted loudly in the courtroom, even abusing the judge. Furthermore, the police had to drag him into the court and out of the court forcefully. However, he was doing all these things to prove that he is mentally unstable, and because of this, he should be spared from the death penalty for the murder of Noor. If it were proven that Zahir is mentally unstable, then firstly, his punishment would be reduced, and secondly, he would escape the death penalty. Actually, Zahir had schizophrenia, and he wanted to take advantage of it by telling the court that he is mentally unfit. Actually, schizophrenia is a serious mental illness in which a person is mostly lost in the world of imagination and knows very little about the real world. Because of this, he often behaves strangely. But when Zahir's medical examination was done, the report clearly stated that Zahir is mentally fit, and whatever he did with Noor, he did it consciously. But this made it clear that Zahir was an abuser and an aggressive person. Besides, there were many harassment cases against Zahir in both the US and Pakistan. In this case, during the ongoing trial in court, the entire Pakistan raised its voice for justice for Noor. Rallies and marches were held every day. As a result, on February 24, 2022, Noor received justice, and Zahir was sentenced to 2 death penalties, one for physically assaulting Noor and the other for her murder. Additionally, his 2 house staff, Iftikhar and Mohammed Jan, were also sentenced to 10 years in jail. Looking at the photos, you wouldn't know much, but Zahir was a powerful, tall, and aggressive man with whom a sweet and innocent girl, Noor, spent almost 48 hours. And those 48 hours were nothing less than hell for her. So with this, the Noor Muqaddam murder case comes to an end right here. In the summer of 2003, the body of 36-year-old Sarpina Payne was found in a field near Tront, Illinois. Sarpina was a black female who was known to support a drug habit with prostitution. Sarpina had last been seen at her home 2 days before her body was found. The original autopsy failed to determine a cause of death, leaving some of the detectives to believe she had overdosed. One detective, however, felt uneasy about that assumption. His suspicions were confirmed as more bodies were found in Peoria and Tazewell counties over the next year. On February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. She was found partially clothed and lying face down in the snow. She had been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the night before. An autopsy showed that she had multiple contusions and abrasions on her body. Toxicology showed that she had fatal levels of cocaine in her blood. At this point, police were not ready to call this a murder or entertain the idea of a serial killer preying on black drug-addicted prostitutes. In October of 2004, 32-year-old Shakonda Thomas was reported missing. She had last been seen by her family in August. Shakonda was known to disappear at times, but when she didn't come back after several weeks, her family reported her missing. Shirley Ann Trapp was also reported missing in the late summer of 2004. She was seen 3 days before she was reported missing. Tamara Walsh was reported missing in September of 2004 after not being seen for 3 weeks. All 3 missing women were also black females known to support a crack cocaine habit with prostitution. 36-year-old mother of 8, Laura Lawler, disappeared from her home after leaving with a man and woman. Her longtime partner searched for her but only was able to determine she had been with a man named Larry. Her boyfriend, and father to her 7 daughters and 1 son, describes Laura as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. The two had experimented with crack cocaine, and Laura seemed to struggle with addiction before her disappearance. On September 25, 2004, Linda Neal was found on King Road in Tazewell County. She was found nude along the side of the road. Linda, like the other women, was known to be part of the drug scene in Peoria. At this point, police had determined there was likely a serial killer stalking black females in the Peoria area. A task force was formed, which one detective states would have occurred much quicker if the victims had been white females. While police desperately searched for the killer, they kept a close eye on women in the community at risk. Despite their efforts, on October 15, 2004, Brenda Irving's body was found in a ditch near Farmington. Brenda was found nude, and an autopsy determined that she had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. She also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system at the time of her death. Her children had feared for their mother's safety, as she had known many of the women who had been killed or disappeared from central Illinois. Brenda struggled with drug addiction. Despite detectives' best efforts, the case proved difficult to solve. They followed thousands of leads, but finally got the lead they were waiting for in December of 2004. 35-year-old Vicki Bomer was arrested for theft. From jail, she told authorities that she thought she could help them find the serial killer preying on her fellow sex workers. She believed that a man who had picked her up in July 2004 was responsible. Bomer explained that in July, a man named Larry Bright lured her to his mother's home where they shared alcohol and drugs. Once she was intoxicated, she said Bright attacked her, attempted to rape her, and pulled a knife on her. Somehow, Bomer was able to escape. Police were at first skeptical, as Bomer asked for a plea deal in exchange for her testimony. Why hadn't she reported this back in July? Why wait until she was under arrest? Vicki Bomer claimed she was scared of being arrested for outstanding warrants, which is why she did not come forward in July 2004. A search of her criminal history confirmed the warrants, so detectives decided to take a look at the man named Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born in Peoria, Illinois, on July 8, 1966. He served a 2-year stint in prison at age 19 for burglary and carjacking. According to Larry's family, the time Larry spent in prison changed him for the worse. Larry became more angry and violent and began using drugs. Larry had an injury, which started an addiction to prescription opioids and later crack cocaine. He also developed an addiction to pornography, preferring videos with black women. Larry lived with his mother in a tiny guest house behind her home. Larry enjoyed gardening, creating a beautiful garden bed of flowers for his mother. When the police arrived at Larry's home following the tip, they noticed the beautiful flowers in the garden. Larry was placed under arrest for the unlawful restraint of Vicki. They questioned Larry about the murders, but he denied having any information about the murdered and missing women. Throughout the interview, Larry smoked several cigarettes. Detectives planned to take one of the cigarette butts and test it for DNA, but Larry ate them before leaving the interrogation room. Larry declined to give DNA voluntarily. Police searched Larry Bright's home on January 20, 2005. The investigators dug up the garden, finding several small bone fragments and ashes that were later determined to be human. When the police questioned Larry again, they told him they were digging up his mother's flowers. At this point, Larry broke down and confessed to multiple murders. He even led investigators to the remains of some of his victims. Larry explained that around July 27, 2003, he picked up Sarpina Payne on the south side of Peoria. He drove her to his home, which he shared with his mother. He claimed the two drank and used cocaine before having consensual sex. Larry said he did not intend to kill Saprina, but he became enraged, thinking Saprina was trying to rip him off. He strangled her to death and dumped her body near the cornfield where she was found. Larry confessed to picking up Barbara Williams in February 2004. Again, he used drugs and alcohol with his victim. He stated that he once again lost control of his anger and killed Barbara. He claimed he caught Barbara stealing from him. He dumped her body along the road, where she was found the next day. The prosecution believed that after the first two murders, Larry developed a bloodlust. At the time of his arrest, he said, "I knew them I would kill the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Larry also confessed to killing Laura Lauer. He burned her body in his backyard burn pit, burying the remains in his mother's yard. He said he wanted to destroy the bodies to avoid getting caught. He confessed to killing Tamara Walls and burning her remains. Her jawbone was found in the backyard. He admitted to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley and Trapp. Shakonda Thomas had the same fate after being picked up by Larry Bright. He burned the woman and buried the ashes in the yard. Because of his attempts to cremate his victims, he was nicknamed the Bone Crusher. Larry said that he attempted to burn Linda Neal and Brenna Irving as well, but the attempts were unsuccessful due to the weather. He dumped both women along the side of the road. Larry was facing the death penalty following his January 2005 arrest. In an attempt to spare his mother the embarrassment of a trial and avoid the death penalty, Larry Bright pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide on May 30, 2006. Bright's murders were not considered racially motivated, but detectives believe he was just attracted to black women. He is one of the very few serial killers who chooses victims outside of his race. Larry was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole, to be served concurrently. He was also given an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. As part of the plea deal, Larry will be required to serve 100% of his sentence with no parole consideration. Larry is currently housed at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but that brings little peace to the families of his victims. The loved ones of Larry's victims want people to know that the women he killed were more than just drug addicts or prostitutes. They were people. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. The serial killer dentist of St. Louis, Glennon Engelman. Dr. Glennon Engelman was born on February 6, 1927, in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Engelman grew up on the south side of the city and felt a deep connection to his neighborhood. After serving in the military, Dr. Engelman used his GI Bill to go to Washington University and become a dentist. He opened his dental office on the south side of St. Louis, serving the community he had always loved. Dr. Engelman, who went by Glenn, was married to a woman named Edna Ruth, but they divorced in 1956. By 1958, both Glenn and Ruth had remarried. Glenn was operating his dental office and appeared to be successfully serving the St. Louis community. On December 17, 1958, citizens in Forest Park noticed a bloody man stumbling. The man, James Stanley Bullock, soon passed from his injuries. These injuries were caused by a gunshot. No one could figure out why someone would shoot 28-year-old James Bullock. James Bullock was born on April 17, 1931, in DeSoto. He was raised in Shiloh, Illinois, by his grandparents and later his aunt after his parents passed away. According to an article from 1938, the then 7-year-old was living with his grandparents in 1938 and enjoyed attending school and fishing. James later served in the military before returning to St. Louis to work and go to college. Back in St. Louis, James met Edna Ruth, the ex-wife of Dr. Glenn Engelman. The two married, and 6 short months later, James was dead. An employee at a local sanitarium initially claimed James was there 4 days before his murder, asking to be admitted because he feared for his life. His wife and aunt said this was not true, as the three had dinner together on that night. According to his widow and aunt, James was not afraid for his life, and they knew no one who would want him dead. However, Edna Ruth benefited greatly from her husband's death. Ruth had life insurance policies totaling $64,088. While under questioning, Edna Ruth made several weird statements, including telling the police she was married before, but her husband did not know. Who was she married to? Her husband's dentist, Dr. Glenn Engelman. Edna Ruth had lied to James and his family and lied on the marriage application about being married before. Police questioned a local career criminal who was out on parole for an assault at the time of the shooting. They weren't able to tie him to the murder of James, but they did note he lived near Dr. Engelman's office. Dr. Engelman and Edna Ruth both refused to take a polygraph test and denied any involvement in the murder of James Bullock. Dr. Engelman's new wife, Ida, refused to be questioned by the police. A patient provided an alibi for Dr. Engelman. However, another witness said that they tried to find someone at the office around the time and the office was empty. Edna Ruth invested part of the funds she received after becoming a widow into doctor. Been bored being a dentist, so he often ventured into other areas of business. This included buying a trike strip along with a partner, Eric Fry. Dr. Engelman had grown to be close friends with Eric and his wife Sandy. On September 26, 1963, Eric and Dr. Engelman were at the trike strip using dynamite to explode and then fill abandoned cisterns on the property. Eric was lying on his stomach near one of the cisterns when the dynamite exploded quicker than anticipated. Eric was killed instantly and found lying in the bottom of the cistern. Coroner H.D. Steinbeck ruled the death accidental. Mr. Frey's wife had an insurance policy on her husband, which she invested part of into Dr. Engelman's practice. Dr. Engelman divorced Ida and married his third wife, Ruth, in 1967. The couple shared a son, but Ruth hated the close relationship her husband had with a young woman who worked in his office named Carmen Miranda. Dr. Engelman offered to train Carmen to be a dental assistant in his office. Edna felt uncomfortable with the flirting between the doctor and his young assistant. Dr. Engelman, however, claimed he was trying to help people in his community. He hired Carmen's brother, Nick, as well at one point. Ruth was relieved when Carmen met a married man named Peter Holm. Just a few months later, however, Carmen and Eric were walking in a rural area in Pacific, Missouri. The couple were exploring an area known to have caves and scenic paths. A shot suddenly fired, hitting Peter in the head. Peter died instantly, and a hysterically Carmen flagged down the help. Nearby, police found an X on a tree made with tape. The area was familiar to locals as a hunting area, and police believed that the shot was accidental. Police believe someone was target shooting at the axe and accidentally struck Mr. Holm. Carmen had a significant amount of life insurance on her husband, totaling $60,000. This is equivalent to around $300,000 in 2024. Dr. Engelman and Ruth divorced soon after, at which time Dr. Engelman married young Carmen, whom he had known since she was a small child. His son lived with Edna, his ex-wife. Despite being married to Carmen, Dr. Engelman and Ruth still met regularly for sex. Dr. Engelman constantly had extramarital affairs, which included previous affairs with Carmen, Ruth, and even Sandy Fry, the wife of his business associate Eric Fry, who was killed by dynamite. Another of Dr. Engelman's affairs was with a patient named Barbara Boyle. On November 3, 1977, someone pretending to be from the farm girl walked up to the farmhouse owned by Arthur and Vernita Goosewell in Everettsville, Illinois. Soon after entering the home, the elderly couple were attacked and both were shot in the head. The wealthy couple left $340,000 to their son, Ronald Goosewell. Guess who Ronald Goosewell was married to? Barbara Boyle. On April 4, 1979, less than 2 years after the murder of his parents, Ronald Goosewell was found dead inside his car outside a hotel in East St. Louis, Illinois. The man had been beaten and shot to death. He had been missing for 4 days when his body was found. Following her husband's murder, Barbara collected his inheritance in addition to several life insurance policies. The equivalent sum of money today would be nearly $1.7 million. Guess who she cut to? Dr. Glenn Engelman. Following the murder of Ronald Goosewell, authorities were starting to notice the trend of connected deaths to Dr. Engelman. His patients and community, however, only saw a generous man committed to helping his community and its citizens. Dr. Engelman was not the greatest dentist, however. He often did a sloppy job of making casts for dentures and dental appliances, requiring the work to have to be redone by the dental lab several times. His business was struggling, however, and he soon found himself in debt with the dental lab owned by Sophie Barrera. Sophie Barrera owned a South St. Louis dental laboratory and had grown tired of waiting for Dr. Engelman to pay up by 1980. She filed a lawsuit against the doctor that was set to go to court just a few days after Sophie was murdered. On January 14, 1980, Sophie entered her vehicle in South St. Louis. Shortly after, the vehicle exploded. Police found remnants of a bomb under her charred vehicle. Sophie had told her son before she was in fear of being killed. She believed Dr. Glenn Engelman was dangerous. Dr. Engelman was questioned for 3 hours and then released. Police were certain he was responsible for Sophie's death, but they had to prove it. The public also wondered if the bombing was related to another bombing in the area that was carried out between two mob families fighting for control over St. Louis's labor unions. The evidence indicated, however, that this was not a mob hit. The number one suspect was the man who owed Sophie $15,000. Dr. Engelman had to be stopped, but the police weren't sure how to do it. Detectives soon began having conversations with Dr. Engelman's ex-wife and mother of his son, Ruth. Ruth told police nothing at first, but eventually started to talk. She explained that Dr. Engelman often bragged about killing people. He told her that he had a superpower. He was able to kill without remorse. He had admitted to killing Eric Fry, Peter Holm, and the Goosewell family. It was his side hustle, killing for profit. Ruth agreed to help the police, but none of her testimony could be used in court because Dr. Engelman confessed to her while the two were still married. He was protected by spousal privilege. Ruth decided to wear a wire, however, and met up with Dr. Engelman to exchange their son and sometimes just to socialize. They were still having a sexual relationship despite Dr. Engelman's marriage to Carmen. She tried to get Dr. Engelman to confess to her again by asking direct questions. He didn't seem to take the bait at first, and Ruth feared he would kill her next. Ruth suggested police plant a bug in her bedroom and she would invite the dentist over for sex. Dr. Engelman was suspicious, however, and did not say anything that could lead to his arrest. Ruth then met him at a diner wearing a wire, and this time he commented on being homicidally intimate with the widow of one of his victims. He admitted to the murders in great detail, providing just what police needed for an arrest. He explained that he found murder more sexually satisfying than sex. His ex-wife was given a new life in the witness protection program. Carmen, who was no longer married to the dentist, and her brother Nick were brought in for questioning to corroborate the allegations against Dr. Engelman. As possible co-conspirators, they asked for and were granted immunity to testify against the dentist. Carmen told quite the story. She said she was working for the dentist when he suggested she find someone with good benefits to marry. He told her about Eric Fry, whom he said he directed Sandy Fry to marry with all intentions of murdering the insurance proceeds. Soon after she was married, Carmen said Dr. Engelman told her where to go and made sure her husband was shot and killed. He staged it to look like a target shooting accident. Glenn Engelman was finally arrested and charged with murder in 1980. Carmen testified at Dr. Engelman's first trial, for which he was convicted of murdering Peter Holm and given 50 years in prison. The dentist then pled guilty to the murder of Sophie Barrera to avoid the death penalty. Serving a life sentence for that murder in Missouri, Dr. Engelman was back in court by 1985 in Illinois. In 1984, Robert Handy, a convict and acquaintance of Dr. Engelman, admitted to authorities that he had taken part in the murder conspiracy of the Goosewell family. He implicated Dr. Engelman, who had bludgeoned Ronald Goosewell and shot him, as well as Ronald's widow, Barbara Boyle. Dr. Engelman was given 3 life sentences for the Goosewell murders. He also was convicted of federal mail fraud and given a 30-year federal sentence. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, including conspiring with his first wife to kill her husband, James Bullock, in 1958. Edna Ruth was never charged in the case due to lack of evidence. Barbara Boyle went on trial for the murder of her in-laws, Arthur and Vernita Goosewell, and husband Ronald in 1985. The jury acquitted her of the murders of Arthur and Vernita but convicted her of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Ronald Goosewell. Barbara Boyle was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 1985. She was granted parole in 2009. Dr. Engelman enjoyed his notoriety in Missouri, often comparing himself to legendary outlaw Jesse James. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, but the actual number is unknown. Unlike other serial killers, Dr. Engelman was inspired, at least in part, by greed. He also seemed to revel in his ability to not feel remorse. Dr. Engelman died of diabetes-related health issues in 1999 at age 72. He was incarcerated in Jefferson City at the time.